Hi, welcome to World Civilizations Since 1500. This is History 2322. My name is Alfonso R. Lopez and I'll be your instructor for this class this spring semester. Now, what we're going to be doing in this video presentation is to go over the syllabus. This is a document that is already posted on Blackboard, and we're going to examine all of the most important components of this course regarding, for example, requirements in terms of textbooks and so on, how we're going to use them, where to obtain the textbook, and so on. We're going to be also looking at the course content, what material we're going to be covering across the semester, the different civilizations. We're going to examine what aspects of those civilizations we're going to be analyzing and assessing and so on. And the themes, the major historical topics or themes that we're going to be also presenting across the semester will be also explained. We're going to also look at exams, how the exams are going to be formatted, how to prepare for those exams, the criteria for the exams, and so on. All of that will be explained. We're going to also explain the extra credit assignments that are available also on Blackboard, and also the major course assignment that is due at the end of the semester, towards pretty much the end, late April again. This is a report that is based on the textbook. Again, I will explain what this assignment entails, how to conduct it, what is the format, the guidelines, and so on. Towards the end, we're going to be looking at grading, how I grade, the major factors that come into play in the equation, and also the things that I take into account as well, besides the major assignments and exams that compose the core of the grade. I will explain that I also look at other factors as well when computing the final grade and so on. So towards the end of this discussion, we will look at the tentative course schedule and assignments, the week by week kind of topics that we're covering, when the exams are due, and when the report and also the final exam is due. Again, this is a tentative course schedule in which provides, of course, a blueprint, a guideline for you to follow, to keep up with the weekly assignments, know when the exams are due, when to turn them in, and so on. And to kind of keep a pace and rhythm with all of the material that we're going to be covering, it is important, as I will explain, that it is important to set some time aside week by week to kind of review the material that is assigned for that week. Okay? Consider this video presentation as the first day of class. If you were to be taking, for example, a face-to-face class in campus, this is the day where you meet the instructor, and the instructor explains everything you need to know about this course, the assignments, the gradings, the exams, and so on. And that provides a good guidance and orientation for you to know how to navigate this course. In this case, this is an online course, and where to identify the major components of this course as well on Blackboard, and how to prepare for the exams. Okay? I highly recommend watching this video very thoroughly. Perhaps take notes if you can, if you wish. And it is a very, very important presentation that attempts to answer most of the questions that I usually receive from students across the semester when they address those questions via email. I usually get questions that, more often than not, can be answered by just simply reviewing this video presentation. Of course, I will be replying to your emails very quickly, and I will be providing guidance, of course, but again, more often than not, the answers are contained here. Okay, so let us take a look now at the Blackboard page. Okay, so when you open the page, this is how it looks like. It is the new interface of Blackboard that got started this past year on the summer of 2025. It's called Blackboard Ultra. It is slightly different from the previous version in that, for the most part, the main menu is now presented on top. It's a menu bar that now is presented on the top part of the page. The most important section of this menu bar for this course is the course content. Everything is really located on the course content, and I mean pretty much everything. Starting with, let us just say, the video presentation. This video presentation will be available at the very top, as you can see, where it says class introduction. Once it's edited and formatted, I will be uploading this, and I will send you an email announcement to you indicating that now the video is available and it is important to review it. Okay. Beneath the class introduction is the syllabus. This is, again, the document that we're going to be pretty much examining in this presentation very thoroughly. I recommend downloading this document on your computer and keeping it safe there, just ready to be reviewed at all times, because, again, pretty much contains all the instructions for this course. Beneath the syllabus, you will find the instructional materials. The instructional materials contains the course video lectures and lecture outlines. So if you click on it, there will be two folders. One is the recorded video lectures, which means that all of the information that you're going to be learning in this course will be presented through a series of recorded video lectures, and they're all contained here in this folder. The folder beneath is called the lecture outlines and questions, and what that contains is the lecture outlines that I use when I'm lecturing. The topics that I'm lecturing contains an outline, and the outline will be visible on your computer. As I'm lecturing, you will be able to see bullet points, key terms, maps and graphs and so on of the different aspects of world history that I'm explaining. Okay, and that's just for your records, because the lecture outlines kind of contain the most important, let us just say, key ideas and concepts that I'm elaborating. Those are not the notes. I mean, it's not going to be possible for you to read the lecture outline and be able to kind of get the general picture and the general analysis of the lecture itself, but the major components that I'm actually addressing. Yes. Okay, so beneath the instructional materials, there's another folder that's titled Course Assignments. You click on it. I made sure to post all of the major course assignments, the 3 exams, and the report. Those are the major components, the core factors, if you will, for the overall grade. At the very end, there's a folder titled Extra Credit Assignments. The extra credit assignments are not mandatory. They're optional. Only when students wish to add points towards the exams, they can do 1, 2, or 3 extra credit assignments. There are 3, by the way, extra credit assignments in this folder. So once again, there's no requirement. You can do either of those assignments, or you can do all of them, etc. It's at the student's discretion. Okay. And at the very end of the list, so to speak, is another folder that's titled Submit Work. All of the coursework, once it's ready for submission, by the way, everything has to be saved, whether we're talking about the exams or the report or the extra credits for that matter, has to be saved either on Word, it's a Word doc, or PDF file. Okay. Why? Well, because Blackboard opens those two applications very easily. All the other applications might or might not work. So again, in many cases, they don't work. Blackboard just cannot open any other application. But for sure, if you want to be 100% certain that your work will be submitted properly and be read for grading, as quickly as possible, just make sure that you submit your work either on Word doc or PDF. Okay? So you click on that and you'll see links to the exams, the report, and the extra credits. It will take you to the upload tab where you upload the work, again, by the due date. So again, it's very easy to navigate this course, that is to say, because it is just everything is under course content. Now, there's other sections of the menu bar on top that will be also used, particularly the announcement page. I'll be posting weekly announcements to let you know where we are, what videos you're supposed to be watching. I'll be posting the announcement on Blackboard and making sure that the announcement is emailed to the students. Okay, so you will be receiving 2 emails per week, either Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday. But for sure, 2 emails will be received in which the announcement is going to state, well, we are here looking at this particular topic, and you're supposed to be watching session 1 of this topic the following day that I'll send the announcement. I'll be indicating that you need to now watch session 2 and so on. Okay. That's just to keep a certain pace and rhythm, in other words, so just to let you know where we are, and that it is important to kind of be looking at this material at this time. Of course, you can look at this material at whatever other time you wish, but that's my best recommendation, that you reserve some time on a weekly basis to be reviewing this material, again, as we move along. Now, I just click on the syllabus link and it takes you to the document itself. So I made sure to provide the entire document ready to be read, and that again keeps it very, very handy and very accessible. Now you can just proceed to read the document. Let's move from the very top, stage by stage, looking at the major aspects and components of this course. Once again, this is World Civilizations, the second part, which looks at world civilizations since 1500 AD. So this is the second part of this course. Classes start on January the 20th. It ends on May the 17th. My name is Alfonso R. Lopez. I will be your instructor for this course this semester, and the fastest and easiest way to reach me is via email. My email is stated, as you can see here, in blue letters, and I prefer all questions and comments and concerns to be addressed via email rather than through course messages on Blackboard, just because when I receive an email, I'm immediately notified. I receive the email. I'm checking my email daily, several times a day, so I'm able to respond very quickly. Whereas if you address your questions through Blackboard messages, Blackboard might or might not send me a notification that I have received a message through Blackboard. Okay, so it is just very, very fast and easy for me to respond to your questions and concerns when you address those questions and concerns via email. And according to ACC policy, furthermore, all communication between students and faculty must take place within the ACC supplied electronic systems, which means that if you send me an email through your private email account, I'm not going to reply to it. So if you are really requiring a prompt response regarding, let's say, clarification on a grade or on an assignment, you want to request an extension, because you're having difficulty submitting that assignment by the due date and so on, it will be best if you address those questions via email through your ACC email account, okay? Other than your private account or Blackboard messages for that matter. Okay, all right, now let's look at the requirements for this World Civilizations course. And we have one textbook that is required for this course. Okay, it's called The Human Record, Sources on Global History, Volume 2, since 1500. And it's the 8th edition. Now, this textbook is not a conventional textbook per se, in which you're going to read a narrative of historical events along with an analysis from chapter to chapter, from cover to cover. Instead, this is a collection of very important and epic, in many cases, historical records produced by very, very famous and renowned and legendary historical actors from around the world that helped shape the future of different civilizations since 1500. Their letters and memoirs, many of them traveling accounts. You're going to be reading actually excerpts of legislation or laws that were pronounced by very important, powerful political figures, and so on. Those are historical sources, direct historical sources that you can read without any interpretation by any historian, without any filter whatsoever. You are hearing the voice and the opinion and the ideas, the sentiments of historical actors as they pronounce those documents in the past. Why we're going to be needing this textbook is because this textbook will be used for completing the report that is due at the end of the course. Okay, so you have the entire semester to complete it. So this textbook, I've selected a series of documents for you to read. They're fascinating, by the way. Documents from, let's say, figures within, let us just say, Latin America, Europe, Africa, the Middle East, China, in this case Asia, and so on, India, and the like. Again, I've selected a series of different civilizations, and I've selected documents that came from those cultures, those societies at different times after 1500 AD for you to read. They're extremely fascinating, very, very influential for understanding even the present world as we know it today. Okay, you'll be able to kind of take a glance at the significance for, let us just say, the rise of Christendom and Islam and the conflict of those two religions and the like, how each see the world around them and society, how each religion is trying to organize human societies in a very different way, and so on. Again, that's just one example. I mean, it's not just going to be religious. It's going to also take a look at politics. It's going to take a look at economics. We're living in a fast-changing world in which the economy has become the main concern of states today. It's called modernity. The states are trying to modernize countries by pushing for change and reform and legislation that will move the country towards a more high-tech industrial economy, for instance. And again, so is going to set off a series of transformations and also crises in many parts of the world. And we're going to be able to see how different societies, how different countries responded to modernity, this idea of industrializing an economy, introducing machinery, introducing factories, for instance, and capitalism as well, investment and the like, and how this is going to transform traditional cultures into more urbanized, class-based societies. Again, so you'll be able to kind of see the formation of the modern world through those readings. Okay, so we're going to look at that assignment as we move along the syllabus. I'm going to explain again how to conduct it, but this is a required text that is solely required for completing this assignment and nothing else. In other words, this is not really required for you to be following along the lectures. The lectures that I'm providing for this course are assembled through a multiplicity of different sources and books I've read over many, many years on world history. And I've read articles as well. And I've assembled, of course, those lectures, which are based from a multiplicity of different sources. And, I'm not really assigning a textbook per se in this course because my lectures are quite distinct. The way they're assembled and formulated, they look at many different aspects of history. It's not just political history. I also look at the history of society, the social history. I also look at cultural history. We look at culture, human cultures, world religions as well. I pay attention to science and technology. This is, again, a time for this birth of the scientific age, the high-tech, again, industrial civilization that is spreading around the world, the scientific revolution, the technological revolution. So I really look at all of those ideas, which I have not found a textbook that can be of any significant help, if you will, in providing aid, if you will, or guidance to the lectures. So again, the lectures kind of stand on their own. I mean, they pretty much are the main source of instruction here. And this book is kind of a supplement, if you will, that you're using in order to kind of hear the voices of historical actors from around the world, how they're thinking about, let's say, modernity, how to formulate a new world, or how to maintain the old world despite, the spread of modernity around the world. Again, all of those issues come into play when combining the use of this book for this report with the format of this course, which is really lecture-based. Where to obtain this textbook? The Highland campus, the ACC bookstore at Highland campus, is the one that carries this text. I'm not aware of a digital format being available in this course, which means that you are going to require getting this book and make sure you're getting the 8th edition, because the 8th edition contains a totally separate set of documents from those available in earlier editions. Okay, so if you happen to buy the 7th or 6th edition and so on, you're going to find that there will be documents missing. As you're trying to proceed with this work, with this assignment, you're not going to be able to complete it. If you have any doubts getting the right textbook for this course, you can also use the ISBN number that is provided here that is going to take you to this textbook, exactly to this textbook, that we need. You may also purchase this textbook online through other vendors, of course, in used formats as well. You can buy it used for maybe half of the price and so on. That's okay. But if you're going to buy it at the ACC Highland bookstore, I highly recommend buying it as quickly as possible, within the next 2 or 3 weeks if possible. Why? Well, because ACC has a policy, the bookstores, of returning unsold copies back to the vendor sometime in mid-semester. So this is the spring semester, which means that if you wait long enough, let us just say, to start getting this book by, let's say, late March, early April, it's not going to be guaranteed that you're going to find it on stock at the ACC bookstore. The bookstore might already have sent all the unsold copies back. They assume that students who did not buy the book by the midpoint of the semester are not going to need this textbook because they bought it somewhere else. Okay. So this has become, of course, a constant problem from time to time in past semesters, where students actually contact me around March and April, really worried that they're scrambling to get a copy of this textbook because they couldn't find a copy at the bookstore. Okay, so again, just letting you know that it will be better to try to buy it as quickly as possible. Okay. All right, so let's look at the course description. What, in other words, we're going to be covering in this course. So this is the second half of World Civilizations. And every instructor that teaches this course, of course, has different themes and different areas of specialty that they focus on, and they're going to present, of course, those areas, placing emphasis on different aspects of global history, might be political, economic, cultural, and so on. In my case, I present this course since 1500 by paying attention to most of the civilizations of the world, most of them, not all, but the most important ones. We're going to be paying attention, of course, to Europe, but we're also going to be paying attention to Africa, the Middle East, China, and other parts of Asia, including India and Latin America. The United States is also going to be part of the discussion, mainly as we move towards the latter part of the course. When we look at the rise, for example, of the American Empire in the 20th century, what it's called the American century. We will be also looking at aspects of American history as the United States, of course, is exerting more and more influence around the world, of course. But it's mainly, again, a series of civilizations that we're going to examine, and also how those civilizations influenced each other, how they impacted each other, mainly in an age in which, starting since 1500, the world has become more and more integrated and interconnected, and to a certain degree also interdependent as well, mainly economically. Okay, there's more international trade taking place since 1500. Okay, the technologies are advancing very fast, mainly transportation technologies, communication technologies, and also we see the advent of the Industrial Revolution that is going to also revolutionize the systems of production. Okay, we see the increase of output in production on almost everything with the Industrial Revolution, which is nothing other than the introduction of machines, the birth of the machine age in this case. Okay, so once again, the world is becoming more and more integrated, which means that human societies from around the world that are coming from different cultures and civilizations are encountering one another. They're establishing permanent commercial relationships with each other. And in that, we're not going to just see the exchange of material goods back and forth around the world, because now we have navigation systems that allow people to travel, far distances around the world, establishing trading networks and routes and outposts, in different continents of the world and so on. It's not just that, but the rise of international trade that is established, roughly speaking, since 1500, that is connecting the world together, is also going to be used, this network, if you will, is going to be used for an exchange of ideas as well. Okay? Ideas are traveling faster and faster than ever before. Cultural ideas, scientific ideas, religious ideas. So again, the civilizations are exerting more and more influence on one another because through the trade or the trade networks, merchants are also traveling along those trade routes, carrying with them, of course, technologies and books. They're carrying also cultural ideas. They're carrying religious texts and so on. And of course, there's also an attempt, at least by some civilizations, particularly the Christian civilizations, to try to spread religions in different parts of the world. There's this missionary effort to spread the faith. The Muslims are doing the same thing across the Middle East and North Africa, Eastern Europe, and also moving into places like Asia as well. Other world religions are also spreading across networks like Buddhism and Hinduism and the like. So we see a totally new world in which ideas are spreading very, very fast like wildfire around the world, and they're transforming human cultures in different parts of the world. So once again, the impact of cultural productions and ideas and technologies, if you will, are no longer constricted to certain regions, but they're now becoming more and more globalized. This is one of the reasons why some historians have proposed that this era of globalization has been an ongoing process that has been occurring for centuries. It's not just something that kind of started in the 20th century, 21st century globalization, but rather it's a historical process that got started many centuries ago with the rise of international trade. Okay, so this is something that we're going to be assessing, how the civilizations are impacting one another and influencing one another, as a result of this global trade network. Along the network, of course, other things are exchanged. It's not just material goods, it's not just cultural ideas, scientific ideas, and religious ideas, but also germs and microbes as well. So this course is also going to be paying attention to epidemic disease, particularly the rise of pandemics, like the Black Plague, for instance, or the pandemics that obliterated the Native American populations, again, in the Age of Conquest, for instance. Okay, and that was the byproduct of this emergent globalized system, if you will, that because people are traveling faster than ever and they're exchanging material goods and ideas, they're also traveling along with microbes, bacteria, viruses that are carrying from one part of the world to another. And this is going to lead to, again, global pandemics. So we're going to see also the influence of pandemics in reshaping human history, altering and in many cases transforming civilizations. We're going to be paying attention closely to those developments as well. Now, in this age that we're examining, we see very clearly the rise of Europe to the world stage. Okay, so this is not a course that is going to be solely focused on looking at European history. Okay, we're looking at global history and looking at a series of civilizations, as I mentioned. But it is very important to note that since 1500, Europe is on the ascent. Okay, and one of the reasons for that is that Europe claimed, if you will, credit for the discovery of America and claimed this newfound continent that was totally unknown to the Europeans and to the people around the world, claimed this continent for itself. So the fact that Europeans colonized the New World, America, that is to say, and started developing a series of enterprises designed for the extraction of all the mineral and natural wealth of America, that gave Europe, if you will, the upper hand. Financially, economically, if you will, Europe started benefiting, if you will, from all of this wealth that was being extracted from America in terms of the agricultural products like sugar, tobacco, rice, indigo, cotton, and so on. The series, again, coffee as well. And Europe started trading those commodities around the world for gold. Not only that, but Europe also found a lot of gold and silver. The different European empires, that is to say, that colonized America, particularly the Spanish in this case, extracted massive amounts of gold and silver from the Americas and transferred those to Spain, and from Spain it started spreading across Europe. So Europe went through an economic revolution, if you will, getting all of this wealth, these minerals and the commodities and the like, and that gave birth to capitalism in Europe. The rise of capitalist societies and capitalist economies. The kingdoms of Europe are now interested in economic growth, kind of adding more and more wealth to their treasuries, to their coffers, and promoting the idea of foreign investment and different ventures from around the world. And that kind of propelled Europe to this era of colonialism. Again, building massive navies for the purpose of going out and trying to establish colonies in America for the purpose of extracting the wealth, but also trying to find trade routes where to trade those goods around the world, tapping also into Africa, and also trying to get a hold of the resources of Africa and the ivory trade, gold, and so on. And also the slave trade. They needed the labor, if you will, to kind of, grow the commodities, the agricultural commodities in the American plantations. And Europeans are also going to move into other places like Asia, particularly China and India. And they're slowly but surely, over time, establishing permanent relationships with those societies. And eventually, as we're moving into the 19th century, Europe will be penetrating more and more those regions economically and also militarily as well. So again, this gave birth to something called colonialism and eventually imperialism, European imperialism. And we're going to see that, the impact of Europe in the other civilizations in this new age of European colonialism and imperialism. Okay, Europe is really going through a makeover, so to speak. As a result of all this wealth, there's going to be new ideas produced in Europe by the rise of the merchant class and the intellectuals. New universities, centers of learning are built in Europe to educate the sons of the merchants, if you will. And that gave rise to an intellectual and philosophical revolution in which Europeans are introducing novel ideas about humanity, what human beings are, what's supposed to be the role that human beings play in the world, and so on. And so we're going to be exploring all of that, ideas such as humanism. The idea is that human beings are at the center of history, that human beings are shaping human history, that we are endowed with reason, the capacity to understand the world around us and shape it to our advantage. Again, we're going to see, a scientific revolution as well, starting in Europe as well. Materialism, understanding reality through matter, the exploration and understanding of the material world through the scientific method. We're going to be exploring all of that. And of course, all of those ideas about humanism and the scientific revolution will also lead to the formulation of new political ideas, the ideas that human beings have the capacity to create a new world for themselves, a new political community, based on representation, what we call today democracy. Again, we see the democratic revolutions spreading like wildfire in Europe as well. And we're going to be paying close attention again to those political ideas that are part of this emergent European system, in which we see the standards of living rising, centers of learning being formulated and created, and the Europeans are actually introducing a new worldview. Again, this is what is called the West, the Western worldview, if you will, based on humanism, rationalism, the scientific method, political representation, and last but not least, capitalism. That again, human beings are in this world to improve their economic conditions, transform their economies, make them more productive, invest in society so society have the institutions for improving, for example, education, for improving investment, banking, for instance, for credit, for the creation of enterprises, and so on and so forth. The Industrial Revolution occurs, of course, in this age of revolutions, and now we got a new mode of production in which we have the introduction of machines and machinery and technologies aiding in the production of goods and services as well in Europe. And that becomes really the European system. That European system is going to be exported around the world. As a whole, this European system came to be known as modernity. Okay, modernity. It's a modern world. It's called modernity. New modes of thought. That's what modernity is. A new mode of thinking, new mode of analyzing the world through modern science, a new mode of organizing ourselves politically. That is called democracy or political representation, civil rights, and so on, elections and the like. In new modes of production as well, which is capitalism, the accumulation of wealth through enterprise and industry as well. All of that together, again, is called modernity. And the impact that Europe is going to have around the world is that it will try to export modernity, modern thinking, if you will, around the world, particularly to the regions, the civilizations that is interacting with. And Europe is doing this not just because they wish to do that, but also because as Europe is emerging as this modern civilization, is doing so through the colonialism that we just explained. It is interacting with the rest of the world through this colonial relationship. European merchants, European companies around the world are extracting resources and wealth and so on in different parts of the globe. And as the merchants are engaged in this massive extraction through colonialism and imperialism, they are trying to, at the same time, transform the cultures that they're interacting with. Okay? They feel that they have this mission to transform the world as a whole and spread what they believe to be the benefits of modernity. Okay? That the cultures from around the world are traditional, are cultures that are trapped in the past, that are still based on ancient modes of thought, based on religion, magic, and myth and superstition, and that they just lack the wherewithal, they lack the technologies, the science, and so on, the rationality, if you will, in order to transform their own society. So again, we're going to see Europe embarked upon this mission, if you will, this so-called civilizing mission to spread the European model or the European system around the world. And this is something that we're going to be paying close attention in this course. How Europeans are trying to change the cultures around the world by building schools and trying to kind of educate the different native and indigenous populations of the society that they're colonizing, building hospitals and trying to export their own modern medicinal systems, modern medicine in this case, in other societies to change their thinking about medicine and the like. Just a few examples. In order to prepare, again, those societies to embrace more and more fully the European way, if you will. At the same time, we're going to explore how those societies reacted or responded to modernity. The societies in Latin America embraced modernity. Did they, with open arms, accepted, again, the European values, the European ideas that were being presented to them? What about Africa? What about China? What about the Middle East and so on? So we're going to look at the different civilizations and how they were responding or reacting, again, to modernity. And so, of course, the responses were varied. It varied from culture to culture, from region to region, and also from country to country. But for certain, what occurs is that as we're moving into the late 19th century, moving into the 20th century proper, most countries around the world, outside of Europe, that is to say, and the United States, were kind of consciously trying to develop their own economies based on aspects of the European model. In other words, that now the mission of countries from around the world, despite the fact that many of them were highly traditional and they wanted to remain quite conservative in that regard, that the governments of countries from around the world, where we're looking at China or Russia, whether we're looking at Mexico, for instance, or Latin America, for instance, as a whole, that those governments were trying to implement reforms in order to open up their countries to foreign investment, in order for foreign investors and merchants and so on and financiers to bring in their capital and their technologies in order to industrialize their economies. In other words, there was a conscious effort to push their countries towards the modern era. In other words, and this is something that we're also going to be paying attention to. The efforts of different civilizations to reform their economies. The Middle East is also going to be assessed in this regard. How in the Middle East there will be some areas, some regions, some governments that are going to also catch up. They're going to try to catch up with the changes that Europeans introduced with modernity as well, mainly capitalist development, industrialization, and the like. Okay, the 20th century will be assessed at last by looking at globalization itself. By the 20th century, we see the rise of globalization, and globalization was now very much in the open. It was something that people recognized that this is really what is occurring in humanity, that the world is becoming more and more than ever before integrated. And we're going to see a struggle, of course, between different systems of modernization. The 20th century was characterized by a struggle or rivalry between two superpowers, world superpowers, that kind of endorsed one particular way of going about modernizing your economy. One was capitalism. Again, this is something that the United States promoted, particularly since the end of the Second World War. And also the Soviet Union, on the other hand, kind of went around promoting a quite different system that also attempted to kind of present an alternative method for modernizing a country, and that was called communism. Again, the 20th century will be assessed for the most part in this course in that regard. This is called the Cold War, the impact of the Cold War around the world, as the United States was really not only promoting, but to a certain degree, kind of pushing countries, if you will, in this direction. And on the other hand, the Soviet Union was kind of doing the same thing. We're going to be looking at examples of Cold War struggles, the struggles of the Cold War as it occurred in Latin America, in the Middle East, in China, for instance, in India, Africa, and the like. Again, how the world was presented with two opposing worldviews, if you will, that were competing on the world stage to transform, of course, their countries and their economies. We see the formation of international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, for instance, and NATO as well, and the Warsaw Pact, and so on. We're going to be looking at all of that as we move along in the 20th century. But needless to say, the 20th century is also going to assess towards the end of this course, looking at the 20th and the 21st century, at some of the challenges that humanity is facing with the rise of a globalized system. We're seeing new technologies in not only transportation and telecommunication, but also military technologies that are far more destructive than ever before. And also how a global economy based on industrialization is affecting the environment. All of that is going to be assessed towards the end. Again, the challenges, the real, if you will, global problems affecting humanity by the emergence of this new modern civilization that is spreading very fast around the world. That is, of course, threatening human existence in this world, because on one hand, you got, of course, very destructive military technologies that just by looking at the First and Second World Wars, we can actually see the destructive power of modern technology. Again, just by looking at those two examples alone, the First World War, and it produced about 25 million deaths, casualties. The Second World War, again, it's estimated that there were anywhere between 50 to 75 million, depending, again, if we're also counting, of course, people that were displaced after the war, people that died from wounds after the war as well, and so on. Again, it's catastrophic, of course, the impact that modern industries have on the environment in terms of pollution, polluting the waters, polluting the soil, the air, and so on and so forth. And overpopulation might be also an issue. Again, the explosion of the human population in just the 20th century alone, again, is also a factor that is going to be assessed as well. The footprint, if you will, that we're leaving on the environment, okay, through all those issues. All of that is going to be assessed in this course. Now, if you're asking, so how are we going to be learning all of this material that I just kind of synthesized in the past 35 minutes? Well, as I mentioned, we're going to be learning all of this material through recorded video lectures. I have decided to teach this course by presenting students with a virtual experience of a face-to-face course. In other words, that instead of just assigning a series of readings and so on, or chapters for you to read and answer some questions on the exam, instead I've decided to present the lectures by using this same software that I'm using right now, which allows students to hear and see the instructor, and allows students also to read the outline on the screen as well. I'm using outlines and I'm presenting bullet points and so on, key concepts and ideas, graphs and charts and photographs and so on, all of that for your visual aid. Okay, so the responsibility of the student in this case is to be watching 2 lectures per week I will be emailing you every week, either Mondays or Wednesday or Tuesdays and Thursdays, with the information, which specific video lecture you're supposed to be watching here. Okay, so going back, let it just say very quickly to instructional materials here in this folder. When you click on it, you will see two folders, the recorded video lectures and the lecture outlines. So if you click on the recorded video lectures, you will find that there are 9 folders because we cover 9 themes. Those are the themes that I kind of explained in the course content when I synthesized all of that material. Again, there are 9 themes that we're going to be covering. And each theme, when you click on it, has 3 videos. Okay, 3 videos. And they're in sequence. You can see session 1, 2, and 3. So ideally, again, the way we're proceeding moving forward is that you're watching those video lectures in this particular order. You start with topic number 1, the many worlds of the pre-modern era, and you watch those in that sequence. 2 per week, by the way. Okay, I will let you know which ones those are. Once we move into the second topic, I will send the announcement and I will indicate, look, now you're supposed to be watching session 1 of the second topic, and so on and so forth. Again, you get the idea. So you will be notified where we are, and I highly recommend that you set some time aside to actually watch those videos in that week. If you can't, well, try to reserve some time the following week to catch up, because what you want to avoid is piling up all of those videos and trying to watch them all at once in a few days is going to be a monumental task. So it will be best, again, to kind of just reserve some time each week to watch those 2 sessions. Okay? Again, there are 9 themes. Each contains 3 videos. Again, that's the entire semester, by the way. Okay? All right. So let's go back to the syllabus. And this is, again, the table of contents, the 3 historical eras we are analyzing in this world civilization since 1500. And within each era, we examine 3 specific themes or topics. So it's thematic. The organization of all of the material presented to you is thematic. I'm not lecturing chronologically what is happening year by year, decade by decade, and so on, but rather, I focus on one aspect that attempts to kind of connect different civilizations together, and I select a topic that kind of looks at that interaction as we're moving along, if you will. Okay? All right, so like I said, we're going to be paying attention to certain areas or aspects as we proceed with those themes. My lectures are not just going to concentrate on politics and economics. Okay, I will be also examining the natural environment and epidemics. As I said, the political, social, and economic systems will be assessed as well. Scientific and religious worldviews are going to be presented here. So world religions and scientific systems, scientific thought, technologies, philosophies and ideologies are also going to be a very strong component of my lectures. Cultural encounters and cultural change, again, looking at human cultures, cultural traditions, cultural mores and norms are going to be also looked at, cultural traditions. The formation of state systems and empires. Again, there's going to be a very strong component in that. Again, the formation of world empires or just empires. Colonialism and anti-colonial movements. Again, it's also going to be an aspect, again, looking at how colonialism emerges, how it was formulated, conducted, but also how other societies, the so-called colonized, responded to colonialism, how they resisted in many cases, or in many cases kind of accommodated, if you will, to colonialism as well, because there's also such a thing as accommodation. Okay. Now, there will be 3 exams for this course, and the exams are going to be based exclusively on the lectures and nothing else. So again, you don't need to worry about following on readings or trying to catch up with any other kinds of assignments in order to prepare for the exams. Just watch the lectures, take notes, and use that material to answer the exams. And the exams are formatted identical. There are 3. They have the exact same format. So just to kind of show you an example, again, of the exams, let us just say, under course assignments, let's open up, let us just say, the first exam. And the first exam shows you the basic format. This is not a timed exam that takes place on a specific day and time, but rather is more like a writing assignment. You have about 5 weeks to complete it. You have the notes available to you. And I've designed this exam in this particular way to make justice, so to speak, to the amount of data and information and the in-depth analysis that I'm providing that kind of requires more time to, let us just say, to address questions, to try to answer questions in a more meaningful way. So if I give you a time exam that only allows for, let us just say, an hour and a half or 2 hours, you're not going to have enough time, if you will, to kind of go in depth and try to explain all of the aspects that are presented in the lectures, okay? So it consists of 2 parts. Part 1, the topic section for 70 points, is actually giving you the option to select 1 topic out of 2. So you only choose either topic number 2 or topic number 3. You choose. So that means that, well, if you're going to choose 1 topic in the exam from a set of 2, well, you might want to say, well, I just really want to just focus on this topic, very fully. I will watch the lectures on this topic and I'll try to answer those questions as fully as possible. That's the idea. You don't need to write an essay necessarily. I mean, you can, but I'm asking you to just address those questions in that order. There are about 4 questions, 3 or 4 questions per topic. You choose 1 topic and you answer each question very fully. And I mean very fully. Pretend you're writing to an audience that has no clue about history whatsoever. You're not writing to the instructor. You're not writing to the professor. You're writing to this audience. You're trying to teach them. So the more you inform them, the more you explain and break it down and analyze, the higher your points will be. Okay? So that's my best recommendation. Okay? For part 1, there must be at the very least 5 full pages to earn a passing grade. Of course, you can go overboard and produce more. There will be no penalties whatsoever, but at the very least, I'm expecting 5 full pages. Okay, just for part 1. Okay, for part 2, if you want to earn a grade above 70, that means you will have to watch for sure topic number 1. Okay, the many worlds of the pre-modern era. Okay, and here I'm asking you to select 3 terms from a set of 6 and answer them very fully. This is not just identification. This is not just definition. This is a full description and explanation of that theme. There's plenty to talk about when you're, for example, you have to explain the social philosophies of China and India, or monotheism and Christianity and Islam, for example. I mean, there's just plenty of information there, okay? So to earn those 30 points, I must see at the very least 1 full page per term, okay, in which you're really, again, explaining and describing very fully, Okay. Okay. So this is very, very important. So altogether, those two parts must be saved in a single document, Word or PDF, and uploaded by the due date. The due date is February the 26th. It tells you the basic formatting. It has to be double spaced and page number and so on. The font with a cover page and everything once again. Now, since this is more like a writing assignment than a test per se, there are some criteria that I will be very adamant in following and enforcing. Okay? I want you to become very, very conscious of this criteria because it will save you a lot of time and hassle, if you will, because this criteria deals with the use of lecture material for answering the exam. Again, this is the only source that you can use for answering this exam. Only lecture material is allowed. Any other kind of material outside of that, whether it is the use of books or online sources or the use of encyclopedia information or documentaries, etc., any other kind of material is totally prohibited when writing the answers of the exam. Okay? So if I start reading something that I did not present, very evidently is there, again, that you're using outside sources, your work will be disqualified. Okay? So please keep that in mind. Again, this is a very, very important announcement that if you want to pass this class and you want to successfully earn the highest grade, all you need to do is just watch the lectures. Okay, use that information for answering the exam and you'll be in good standing, no problems. Otherwise, students who decide not to heed this warning and for some reason they feel that they can get away with using outside sources, those are the students that will not be passing this course. Okay, even when they write many pages and so on, they submit a very, very lengthy work and so on, they're not going to pass this course. The other criteria involves the use of AI for formatting or for writing your work. I know this is something that students feel very compelled to use. So instead of them actually writing and kind of exercising their writing skills, they decide to outsource this skill, this faculty, to a computer generated system, and that is also going to be penalized. Again, it's very easy to detect, by the way. Instructors also have, of course, the means, the technologies to detect the use of AI, the use of ChatGPT, the use of any other kinds of sources outside of the lectures. And again, we also detect that, and for this course, the use of AI, ChatGPT, or the use of outside sources are strictly prohibited, precisely because that becomes an impediment for academic growth, at least for this particular class, for the historical discipline. I don't know about any other classes. I'm not actually generalizing, but for a history course, the student must demonstrate that they have been present, they have been participating in this course, which means they have been watching the lectures, taking notes, and that they're producing an original work, meaning that they are the ones that are actually writing the answers. They're the ones that are attempting to explain and analyze this material in their own way, and that they have received no other assistance through this new technology. Okay? So students must earn the grade. We professors don't award the grade. The students earn the grade, and they must demonstrate that they have been doing the work. Okay? The other issue is the use of transcriptors. Again, the using of software or applications that can transcribe my notes. Instead of watching the lecture, some students decide to just use a transcriptor and kind of transcribe my notes. And all they do is that they submit my own transcriptions. So I'm actually reading what I just said almost verbatim. And that's also not an original work. That does not earn a passing grade as well, because what that shows is that you did not even watch the lectures. Okay, so please keep that in mind, because every semester I have issues such as this. Students who present work that was assisted by AI or the use of outside sources, or they submit transcriptions and they don't pass this course. Okay, even though they finish this course and submit everything, it's just that what they submitted was not really produced by them. Okay. All right. So at any rate, this is the exam. And as I said, the three exams are identical: the first, second, and final exams. Okay. So let's move further along the syllabus. We're almost through. And there's certain, of course, still aspects to cover. Mainly, we have to cover the extra credit assignments. Like I said, there are 3 extra credit assignments available to all. They're not mandatory, they're optional. Only if you wish to add more points towards the exam, you can do so. And they're based also on documents that I've selected from this text. Okay. They're very easy to do. Just read the documents, answer the questions again, and fulfill the minimum requirements per extra credit assignment submitted on Blackboard by the due date. And again, you'll earn those additional points. You have until the 27th of April to withdraw from this course. If you decide to drop this course for extraordinary reasons, I mean, I totally understand. But if you're just falling behind and you feel you can catch up, if you just allowed additional time, some minor extensions here and there, please talk to me. And of course, we can provide those extensions. My intention is to help you actually pass this course. Okay. So if you just need more time and so on, please let me know. Okay. All right. So as I said, there's going to be a major course assignment. It's called the Study Questions Report that is due on April 23rd. And it's based on this textbook. Please try to get it as quickly as possible. And I've selected different documents from different civilizations for you to read and answer some questions on those documents. So this is 25% of your grade, and it is very easy to do, but it's very, very significant and very, very valuable, because it presents documents that were produced by different civilizations since 1500 from the Americas. As you can see, you're going to see, for instance, certain documents that relate to the conquest of Mexico by Spain. Some of the Spanish missionaries and conquistadors were actually writing again about the conquest. Read those documents, answer those questions in that order. About Latin America, we talked about how the governments of Latin America were trying to modernize their economies, and we're going to see certain statesmen writing about the growing economic dependency that Latin America was acquiring on foreign investors and capitalists, again, mainly Americans and Europeans. And that, of course, led to the rise of nationalism and revolution, again, in Latin America. There are documents on Africa that also relate to the slave trade in this case, and also the colonialism, European colonialism on the African continent as well. Again, how within Africa, there's going to be a reaction or a response to this massive imposition and extraction of wealth by the Europeans, and how it affected African societies and how disrupted them, in very serious ways. We looked at India as well. Likewise, there are documents that present the visions of India in terms of India trying to modernize and move away from this traditional ancestral past, the different challenges it faced. We got Gandhi talking about anti-colonialism and so on and so forth, home rule. We look at China also, again, the Chinese Revolution that was trying to kind of oust the European domination as well. We look at that as well. And at the same time, we look at more modern, visions of China, as China is kind of abandoning communism and trying to kind of modernize its economy, introduce elements of capitalism as well. The Middle East, there's also responses to modernity. We see Islam pretty much at work, if you will, kind of clashing, if you will, with the Western worldview. And here we got, of course, pronouncements by certain figures that kind of tell how the Islamic world sees the presence of Western values, again, in the Middle East. Okay. So all in all, this work must be 10 pages in length, double spaced, and submitted by the due date, April 23rd. Okay. And it's 25% of your grade. So I highly recommend getting started as soon as possible. Okay. So there are 4 major components, 4 major factors for your grade in this course: the 3 exams and the report, 25% each. And on top of that, you can add, of course, extra credit points if you decide to do them. And also, I take into account progress and effort. Please understand that when I'm calculating grades at the end of the semester, I'm actually doing that on an individual basis. I'm looking at each student's development, progress or lack thereof. If you're moving from the first to the second to the final in a rising arc from a 74 to an 85 to a 91, well, there's, of course, improvement. And if you submitted 1 extra credit assignment, that's another factor that I'm going to take into account. So if you happen to be borderline, kind of short a point from receiving the next letter grade, and if I see those factors present, I will reward you with the additional point you need to move into the next letter grade. Okay, that's just an example. Okay, at the end, you will see important calendar dates. The first day of class is January the 20th. The spring break is March 16th to the 20th. April 27th, the last day to withdraw from this course. And final exams, the week of May the 11th to the 15th. Okay, and at the end, again, we got a week by week kind of schedule. As we're moving along, I'm letting you know which topics we're covering and when we're having the first exam, when it has to be submitted. I will let you know days in advance when the exam is due to inform you. February the 26th, the first. Then the second exam is due on April the 9th. And finally, the final exam is due May the 14th. Keep in mind, of course, the report is due April 23rd. Is stated here in the syllabus as well. Again, so at any rate, I will be notifying you of the topics that we're covering on a weekly basis and when the assignments and the exams are due. All of that, you'll be receiving notification from me as we're moving along. I hope you found this video presentation very valuable and helpful in identifying the major components and requirements and expectations for this course. The material that we're going to cover as well was very thoroughly explained as well, what we're going to be concentrating on. If you have any questions, please let me know. Send me an email and I will be responding Monday through Friday within a 24-hour period. During the weekends, I might take 48 hours and I will be responding by early Monday morning. Again, once again, my name is Alfonso R. Lopez. I'll be your instructor for this course this semester, and I will see you in the first announcement coming up, the first day of class, to let you know that this video has been uploaded. Thank you.